Unfall. Unfall. Da war's.
Audrey Bennett thought the only thing she had to worry about that Tuesday was the rain ruining her suede shoes. She was wrong. Dead wrong. In the time it took to stir sugar into her tea, her entire life was erased. It didn't start with an explosion or a scream. It started with a whisper from a stranger in a $3,000 suit who slid into her booth, gripped her hand under the table, and gave her a choice that wasn't a choice at all. Smile, darling, or we both die right here. This is the story of how a quiet librarian became the most dangerous woman in the city. By accident, rain lashed against the bay windows of the Gilded Leaf, a high-end tea room tucked away in the Kensington district that smelled perpetually of old books and lavender. For Audrey Bennett, this was sanctuary. At 26, she lived a life defined by the Dewey Decimal System and quiet evenings in her small apartment on Baker Street. She liked order. She liked predictability. Audrey lifted the delicate bone china cup to her lips, inhaling the bergamot scent of her Earl Grey. The shop was nearly empty, save for an elderly couple in the corner and a barista boredly wiping down the espresso machine. The brass bell above the heavy oak door chimed. The atmosphere in the room didn't just shift, it shattered. The air suddenly felt heavier, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Audrey's arms stand up. She glanced over the rim of her cup. A man had entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and soaked in rain that glistened on his black trench coat like oil. He didn't look like the type of man who came in for chamomile and scones. He looked like a storm front given human form. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes were dark, scanning the room with the predatory precision of a wolf assessing a herd. He didn't head for the counter. He headed straight for her. Audrey's breath hitched. She lowered her cup, her instincts screaming at her to grab her purse and run, but her legs felt like lead. Without a word, the man slid into the booth directly opposite her. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but it was a cruel kind of beauty. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, disrupting the perfection of his face. "Don't scream," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like a cello played in a deep cavern. "Don't look at the door, and for the love of God, pour me a cup of tea." Audrey stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Excuse me, who are—" "My name is Dominic," he interrupted, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her dizzy. He reached across the table. His hand was large, warm, and rough. He covered her trembling hand where it rested on the tablecloth. "And right now, I am your husband. We are having a lover's quarrel. You are upset because I forgot our anniversary. Now pour the tea." "I'm going to call the police," Audrey whispered, pulling her hand back. Dominic's grip tightened just enough to stop her. He didn't look at her. He looked past her, at the reflection in the window. "See the two men who just walked in? Grey suits, hands in their pockets." Audrey started to turn. "Don't turn," he hissed, a flash of genuine panic cracking his composed mask. "Look in the reflection." She obeyed. In the darkening window glass, she saw them. Two men, bulky and grim, standing by the entrance. They weren't looking at the menu. They were scanning the patrons. One of them adjusted his jacket, and Audrey saw the unmistakable glint of a shoulder holster. "They are looking for a man alone," Dominic said softly. "A man vulnerable. But if I'm here with my wife, having tea, I become invisible. I become a civilian. Why are they looking for you?" Audrey's voice shook. "Because I stole something from their boss," Dominic lied effortlessly, though Audrey wouldn't know it until much later. "Now, pick up the teapot. Pour. Smile, damn it." Audrey's hand shook violently as she lifted the floral teapot. Hot amber liquid splashed onto the saucer. "Steady," Dominic murmured. He leaned in, his inches inches from hers. He smelled of rain, expensive tobacco, and sandalwood. "You're doing great, love. Just breathe." The two men in grey suits began to walk through the tables. Their heavy boots thudded ominously on the hardwood floor. "They're coming," Audrey squeaked. "I know," Dominic said. "Take a sip. Look at me like you hate me. But you love me. Can you do that? I don't even know you." "Perfect. That's the exact emotion I need." The footsteps stopped right beside their booth. Audrey froze, the cup halfway to her mouth. "Excuse me," a gravelly voice said. Dominic turned his head slowly, an expression of mild annoyance on his face. "Can I help you, gentlemen? We're in the middle of something private here." The man in the grey suit looked from Dominic to Audrey. He looked at Dominic's hand covering hers. He looked at the half-eaten scone. "We're looking for someone," the thug grunted. "Well, unless he's hiding in the sugar bowl, he isn't here," Dominic snapped, channeling the energy of an irritated husband perfectly. He turned back to Audrey, softening his gaze. "I told you, darling. I'm sorry about the dinner reservations. I'll make it up to you." The thug lingered for a second longer, his eyes narrowing. Audrey felt a scream building in her throat. If she spoke, if she blinked the wrong way, this man would kill them both. She saw it in his dead, shark-like eyes. So she did the only thing she could think of. She kicked Dominic under the table, hard. "You always say that, Nico," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, improvising a nickname, "but you never mean it." Dominic's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise, but he recovered instantly. "I mean it this time." The thug scoffed, apparently satisfied that no mafia hitman would be getting publicly scolded by a mousy woman in a tea shop. "Sorry to disturb you." The men turned and walked out into the rain. Audrey exhaled, her entire body slumping against the booth. "They're gone." Dominic didn't relax. His eyes tracked them until they vanished down the street. Then he looked back at Audrey. The charm was gone. The predator was back. "You have good instincts, Audrey," he said. She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He pointed to the library book on the table. Checked out to A. Bennett. Lucky guess on the first name. "You need to leave," Audrey said, her hands shaking again. "Now." "I can't." Dominic stood up and buttoned his trench coat. Because they didn't leave to go home, they left to call for backup, which means this place is about to become a war zone. He extended a hand toward her. "Come with me. If you stay here, they'll come back and ask you questions you don't want to answer. And when they realize you saw their faces, they won't let you walk away." Audrey looked at his hand. It was a lifeline or a trap. "I have a cat," she blurted out stupidly. "My driver loves cats," Dominic said, his face deadly serious. "Now get up, Mrs. Rossi. Our carriage awaits." The car wasn't a carriage. It was a matte black SUV with bulletproof glass thicker than a phone book. Audrey sat in the back seat, clutching her purse to her chest, watching the city of Chicago blur past in streaks of neon and rain. Dominic sat next to her, tapping furiously on a phone. The air in the car was silent, save for the hum of the tires on wet asphalt. "Where are you taking me?" Audrey asked, finding her voice. "A safe house," Dominic replied without looking up. "The penthouse at the St. Regis. It's under a shell company name. Sabatini's men won't look for me there." "Sabatini?" Audrey asked. Is that who those men were?" Dominic finally looked at her. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Luca Sabatini. He thinks I killed his brother." "Did you?" Dominic paused, the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "I didn't kill his brother, Audrey. I killed the man his brother sent to kill me. There is a distinction." Audrey felt a cold knot of nausea in her stomach. "I want to go home. Please, I promise I won't say anything." "You can't go home," Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave. "Look at your phone." Audrey pulled her phone out of her pocket. It was buzzing with notifications. Missed call from landlord. Missed call from Mum. "Why?" "My security team is scrubbing your digital footprint as we speak," Dominic said calmly. "If Sabatini finds out who you are, he will use you to get to me. He thinks you're my wife, remember? That makes you a target. You made me a target, Audrey shouted, anger finally overriding her fear. I was just having tea. You sat down at my table. And I saved your life by doing so, Dominic shot back, his eyes flashing. If they had found me alone, there would have been a shootout. You would have been caught in the crossfire. You're alive because I improvised. The car swerved sharply, taking a turn onto Lakeshore Drive. We have a problem, boss, the driver said. He was a massive man with a shaved head, whom Dominic called Silas. Tail, 2 cars back. Black sedan. Lights are off. Dominic cursed in Italian. He reached under the seat and pulled out a handgun. It looked terrifyingly heavy. Audrey, get down, Dominic commanded. What? Get on the floorboard, now! Audrey scrambled off the leather seat, curling into a ball in the footwell. The car accelerated, the engine roaring like a beast. Silas, lose them! Don't engage unless necessary, Dominic barked. The car swerved again, throwing Audrey against Dominic's legs. She felt the car skid, the tires screaming against the wet road. A loud crack echoed. Gunfire. The rear window spiderwebbed but didn't shatter. They're shooting at us, Audrey screamed. Stay down. Dominic's hand was on her head, pushing her lower. He wasn't trembling. He was completely still, his other hand gripping the door handle. The chase lasted for 10 agonizing minutes. Sharp turns, sudden brakes, the sound of metal grinding. Finally, the car slowed down and pulled into what felt like an underground garage. Clear, Silas said, his voice level. Dominic helped Audrey up. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Are you hurt? He asked, checking her arms. I don't think so. Good. He opened the door. Welcome home, darling. They took a private elevator up 40 floors. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that was larger than Audrey's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. It was cold, modern, and beautiful. Silas, get a medical kit and some brandy, Dominic ordered. He led Audrey to a white leather sofa. I don't drink, she whispered. You do tonight, he said, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed her one. Drink. It stops the shaking. Audrey took a sip. It burned, but the warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. So, she said, staring at the glass, I'm a prisoner. No, Dominic said, loosening his tie and tossing his jacket onto a chair. You are a guest, a highly protected guest. For how long? Dominic walked over to the window, looking out at the city he practically owned. Until I can prove Sabatini is moving product through my territory and violating the treaty. Once the commission sees the proof, they'll sanction him. He'll have to back off. And how long will that take? A week? Maybe 2. He turned to her. But there is a complication. Of course there is. The commission, the heads of the 5 families, they are old-fashioned. They don't trust a leader without a legacy, without a family. Dominic took a step toward her. My father died last month. I am the new Don of the Cavallo crime family. But my position is weak because I am unmarried. They think I am reckless. Audrey's eyes widened. She saw where this was going. No. The rumors are already starting, Dominic continued, ignoring her protest. My men saw us at the tea shop. The word is out that Dominic Cavallo has a secret wife, that he's settled down. He stopped in front of her, leaning down, his hands resting on the back of the sofa, boxing her in. If I deny it, I look weak. I look like a liar, and Sabatini will kill you just to prove a point. So what are you saying? Audrey asked, though she already knew. I'm saying that for the next 2 weeks, you need to be Audrey Cavallo, Dominic said. We have to sell it. To the public, to the press, and to the 5 families at the Winter Gala this Friday. And if I refuse? Dominic's expression softened, just a fraction. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. He placed it on the table. It was a picture of a young woman leaving a university lecture hall. Your sister, Maya. She studies at NYU, right? Audrey went cold. If you touch her, I won't, Dominic said swiftly. But Sabatini will. His reach is long. If you leave this room, you and your sister are open targets. If you stay, if you play the part, I put 20 men on her detail. She won't even know they are there. She will be the safest student in New York. Tears stung Audrey's eyes. It was blackmail, wrapped in silk. You're a monster. I am a king trying to hold on to his kingdom, Dominic corrected, and every king needs a queen. He held out his hand again, just like in the tea shop. 2 weeks, Audrey. You give me 2 weeks of your life, pretend to be in love with me, and I give you $5 million and a ticket to anywhere in the world when this is over. Plus your sister's safety. Audrey looked at the photo of Maya. She looked at the scar on Dominic's eyebrow. She looked at the sprawling, lonely city outside the window. She took a deep breath, finished the brandy in one gulp, and slammed the glass down. I hate tea, she lied, standing up to meet his gaze. And if we're going to do this, you're going to have to learn that I prefer coffee. Black. Dominic's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. Noted, Mrs. Cavallo. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, blindingly bright. But Audrey didn't wake up in the master bedroom. She woke up on the white leather sofa, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than her student loans. She sat up, her neck stiff. The events of the previous night rushed back like a tidal wave. The tea shop, the gunshots, Dominic. Good morning, Audrey jumped. Dominic was sitting at the dining table, already dressed in a crisp charcoal suit. He was reading a newspaper, an actual paper one, and drinking espresso. He looked infuriatingly fresh, while Audrey felt like she had been dragged through a hedge backward. I have clothes for you in the guest room, he said without looking up. Shower, change. The stylist will be here in 20 minutes. Stylist? Audrey rubbed her eyes. I have clothes at my apartment. Your apartment is being watched, Dominic said, turning a page. And frankly, darling, your cardigan collection screams, bakes cookies for cats, not married to the most dangerous man in Chicago. We need to sell a fantasy, and fantasies wear silk. Audrey bristled. There is nothing wrong with my cardigans. 20 minutes, he repeated, finally looking at her. His gaze was clinical, assessing. Don't make Silas come get you. An hour later, Audrey stood in front of a full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. A team of 3 women, who worked with the silent efficiency of a pit crew, had plucked, polished, and painted her. Her mousy brown hair had been blown out into glossy, voluminous waves. Her makeup was sharp, accentuating her cheekbones and giving her eyes a smoky, mysterious allure. She wore a dress of emerald green velvet that hugged every curve she usually hid, with a slit that went dangerously high up her thigh. Too much? She asked the air. Not enough, a voice said from the doorway. Dominic leaned against the frame, his arms crossed. For a second, just a split second, Audrey saw his composure falter. His eyes darkened as they swept over her. But he blinked, and the mask was back. It will do, he said gruffly. Come here. We have work to do before tonight. He led her to the living room, where he had laid out index cards on the coffee table. Study these, he commanded. This is us. How we met. Where we honeymooned. My favorite color, your favorite flower. Audrey picked up a card. Meeting, a charity auction in Paris. 3 years ago. We didn't meet in Paris, she said dryly. We met because you hijacked my tea time. Stick to the script, Audrey. Sabatini will be looking for cracks. If you hesitate, if you stumble, he will know. Dominic poured himself a water. So where did we honeymoon? Lake Como, Audrey read. We stayed at the Villa d'Este. Good. And what is my allergy? Strawberries. Wrong, he snapped. I have no allergies. Weakness is death. I told the press I was allergic to strawberries, so rivals wouldn't try to poison my wine. If someone offers me a strawberry tart tonight, you stop me. You say, oh, darling, remember your hives. It makes you look protective. They spent the next 4 hours drilling. It was grueling. Dominic was a perfectionist, correcting her tone, her posture, even the way she held her wine glass. "You're slouching," he critiqued, circling her like a shark. "A Don's wife walks like she owns the ground she steps on, chin up." He placed a finger under her chin, tilting her head back. The contact sent a jolt of electricity down Audrey's spine. He was close, too close. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Why me?" she whispered, breaking character. "Why didn't you just hire an actress?" Dominic didn't pull away. His thumb brushed her lower lip, a gesture that felt shockingly intimate. "Actresses act," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "They are trained to fake emotion. But you, in that tea shop, when you were terrified, you looked at me with genuine fire. You fought back. I don't need a fake. I need someone real enough to bleed." He dropped his hand abruptly and stepped back. The moment shattered. "We leave in 10 minutes. Put on the heels. And Audrey?" She looked at him. "Do not leave my side. Tonight, the sharks are feeding." The winter gala was held at the Grand Historic Hotel, a place of crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and people who decided the fate of the city over champagne. As the black SUV pulled up to the red carpet, flashbulbs erupted like lightning. Audrey's heart hammered in her throat. "Breathe," Dominic commanded softly. He reached over and took her hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "Look at me. Only me." The chauffeur opened the door. Dominic stepped out first, buttoning his tuxedo jacket. He turned and offered his hand to Audrey. She took it, stepping out into the blinding chaos. "Mr. Cavallo! Mr. Cavallo! Is it true?" "Who is she?" "Look here. To the left." Dominic ignored them all. He placed a possessive hand on the small of Audrey's back, guiding her through the throng of reporters. He moved with a lethal grace, parting the crowd like the Red Sea. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. A string quartet played something classical and haunting. As soon as they entered, the room went quiet. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the air. "Showtime," Dominic whispered in her ear, his lips brushing her hair. "Smile, darling." Audrey forced a smile, leaning into him. She felt the hard muscle of his arm beneath his jacket. "Dominic!" A booming voice echoed across the floor. A short, stout man with a face like a bulldog waddled over. He was smoking a cigar indoors. This was Victor the Hammer Russo, head of the shipping unions. "Victor," Dominic nodded, his expression polite but guarded. "I didn't believe the rumors," Victor said, his beady eyes raking over Audrey. "I thought you were married to the job, Dom." "I made an exception," Dominic said smoothly, pulling Audrey tighter against his side. "Victor, this is my wife, Audrey." Audrey extended a hand, remembering her training. "A pleasure, Victor. Dominic has told me so little about his work friends. He likes to keep business out of the bedroom." Victor laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Is that so? Smart man. Where did you two find the time? Last I heard, Dom was in Sicily dealing with supply chain issues." "We eloped," Audrey said, the lie rolling off her tongue easier than she expected. "In Paris. It was very sudden, very romantic." "Paris," Victor mused. "Expensive city." Before he could probe further, a shadow fell over the group. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Dominic!" A silky, venomous voice purred. Audrey felt Dominic's muscles coil tight as steel wire. She turned to see a man standing behind them. He was lean, elegant, and had eyes like dead fish. He wore a white tuxedo jacket, standing out against the sea of black. "Sabatini," Dominic said. The name came out like a curse. Luca Sabatini smiled, showing too many teeth. And this must be the mystery bride. He took Audrey's hand before she could offer it and kissed the knuckles. His lips were cold. "Charmed. I am Luca, an old associate of your husband." "Audrey," she managed to say, fighting the urge to wipe her hand on her dress. "You have excellent taste, Dominic," Sabatini said, not letting go of her hand. "Though I am surprised. I always thought you preferred blondes." Like that girl. What was her name? The one who disappeared last year? It was a bait, a trap. Dominic didn't flinch. People change, Luca. Just like alliances. Dominic stepped forward, physically inserting himself between Luca and Audrey. Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife promised me a dance. Of course, Luca stepped back, his eyes gleaming with malice. But be careful on the floor, Mrs. Cavallo. It can be slippery. Dominic steered her onto the dance floor. He pulled her close, his hand firm on her waist, holding her flushed body against his. They began to move to the slow waltz. That was him, Audrey whispered, her voice trembling. The man who sent the thugs. Yes, Dominic said, his jaw tight. He's trying to rattle you. Don't let him. He looked at me like I was dinner. He won't touch you, not while I'm breathing. Dominic spun her around, his eyes locking onto hers. You did well with Victor. The business out of the bedroom line was perfect. I read a lot of books, Audrey said breathlessly as he dipped her. The world spun, crystal lights, curious faces, and Dominic's intense gaze anchoring her. Tell me, Audrey, Dominic said as he pulled her back up, their faces inches apart. In those books, does the hero ever fall for the fake wife? The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. Audrey's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, they weren't pretending. The noise of the gala faded. It was just the heat of his hand, the scent of his cologne, and the question in his eyes. Usually, she whispered, reckless. But this isn't a book. It's a job. Dominic's eyes darkened. He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. He was going to kiss her. Here, in front of everyone. To seal the deal? Or because he wanted to? Suddenly a waiter bumped into them, spilling a tray of champagne glasses. The crash was deafening. So sorry, sir, the waiter stammered, terrified. Dominic released Audrey instantly, stepping back to check his suit. The moment was gone, severed as cleanly as a ribbon. It's fine, Dominic told the waiter, his voice cold again. He looked at Audrey. Go to the restroom. Clean up any splash marks. I need to talk to Victor alone. Take Silas with you to the door. Audrey nodded, feeling strangely bereft at the loss of his touch. She turned and headed towards the ladies' room, Silas trailing 5 steps behind her like a shadow. The restroom was palatial, filled with marble and gold. It was empty. Audrey moved to the sink, splashing cold water on her wrists. Her pulse was racing. Does the hero ever fall for the fake wife? Why had he asked that? The door to the restroom opened. Audrey looked up in the mirror, expecting another guest. Instead, 2 men in maintenance uniforms walked in. One of them locked the door behind him. Audrey spun around, her back hitting the marble counter. This is the ladies' room. We know, said the taller one. He pulled a rag from his pocket. It smelled of chloroform. Mr. Sabatini wants to send a wedding gift. He thinks the groom should be a widower. Audrey looked for an exit. There was none. She opened her mouth to scream for Silas, but the man lunged. She ducked, grabbing a heavy glass vase of orchids from the counter and swinging it with all her might. It connected with the man's head with a sickening crunch. He staggered back, blood pouring from his temple. You little bitch, the second man growled, pulling a knife. Audrey backed away, grabbing a can of hairspray left by a guest. As the man with the knife lunged, she sprayed it directly into his eyes. He howled, blindingly slashing the air with the knife. Audrey scrambled under his arm, kicking off her heels to run. She reached the door, pounding on it. Silas! Silas! The door exploded inward. Silas stood there, his gun drawn. He assessed the scene in a nanosecond. One man bleeding on the floor, the other blinded. Clear! Silas grunted. He looked at Audrey, who was panting, holding the hairspray like a weapon. You okay, Mum? Audrey looked at the unconscious hitman. I think I broke the vase. Boss is going to love this, Silas said, actually smiling. Minutes later, Dominic stormed into the hallway. He looked terrifying. His tie was undone. His gun was visible in his holster, completely uncaring of the gala guests gasping in the corridor. He saw Audrey, barefoot, holding her shoes, shaking. He didn't speak. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and grabbed her face in his hands, tilting her head to check for bruises. "Did they touch you?" His voice was a low growl, vibrating with a rage so pure it felt hot. "No," Audrey managed. I hit one with a vase." Dominic stared at her. Then he let out a breath that sounded like a laugh of disbelief. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his arms around her so tightly she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her neck. "I'm burning this city down," he whispered against her skin. "Sabatini dies tonight." "Dominic, no," she pulled back, looking at him. "If you kill him here, you lose the commission. You said you needed proof." "I don't care about the commission," Dominic roared, causing a passing waiter to drop a tray. "He came after my wife." Audrey froze. He hadn't said "my fake wife." He hadn't said "the asset." He said "my wife." And the terrifying thing was, the look in his eyes said he meant it. The exit from the Grand Historic Hotel was less of a departure and more of an evacuation. Surrounded by a phalanx of Cavallo guards, Dominic practically carried Audrey through the service exit, shielding her face from the few lingering paparazzi who had sniffed out the scent of blood and scandal. Silas drove the SUV like a battering ram on wheels. Inside the cabin, the silence was suffocating. Dominic sat rigid, his jaw locked so tightly a muscle feathered in his cheek. He hadn't let go of Audrey's hand since the hallway. His grip was tight to the point of pain, but she didn't complain. She needed the anchor. Her adrenaline was crashing. The image of the man's face when she sprayed him, the raw, animalistic violence she had been forced to commit, kept flashing behind her eyes. She was a librarian. She organized the history section. She didn't smash vases over the heads of contract killers. "Dominic," she whispered into the dark. He didn't answer immediately. He was staring straight ahead, his eyes flat and terrifyingly empty of humanity. He was calculating. He was a general reviewing casualty reports and planning counterstrikes. "Dominic, you're hurting my hand." He blinked, as if waking from a trance. He looked down at their joined hands, his knuckles white. He instantly loosened his grip, but didn't release her. "Sorry," he grated out. His voice sounded like it was full of broken glass. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Dominic said, pulling out a burner phone. "I remind Luca Sabatini why my father used to be called the Devil of Chicago, and I remind him that I am worse." He dialed a number. "It's me. Burn it." He hung up. Audrey stared at him, horrified. "Burn what?" "Sabatini's main distribution hub on the docks. It contains about $20 million of unlaundered cash and narcotics." "Dominic, you said we needed proof for the commission. If you just start a war without their blessing, damn the commission." He finally turned to her, his eyes blazing in the shadows of the car. "The rules of engagement changed the second his men put their hands on you in that bathroom. You think I care about territory right now? You think I care about money? He tried to take you from me." The intensity of his declaration sucked the air out of her lungs. "Take you from me, not take the asset." "You're going to start a street war," she murmured, realizing the terrifying power this man wielded. A single phone call from him, and buildings turned to ash. "It's already started, Audrey. I'm just finishing it." They arrived back at the St. Regis penthouse. The security detail was doubled. Men with assault rifles stood by the private elevators. The sanctuary now felt like a fortress under siege. Inside, Dominic didn't stop moving. He strode to the liquor cabinet, pouring a scotch with a shaking hand. He didn't drink it. He just stared at the amber liquid. Audrey stood in the middle of the vast living room, still in her emerald gown, barefoot, holding her heels. She felt absurd. She felt terrified. And underneath it all, she felt a strange, confusing surge of warmth that he was tearing the city apart for her. "You should have let me kill him at the gala," Dominic said quietly to the glass. "And go to prison for life? or get gunned down by his 50 guards. Audrey walked over to him, placing her heels on the coffee table with a loud clack. "I saved your life tonight, just as much as you saved mine." Dominic turned slowly. The rage was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it was mixed with something else now. Exhaustion and guilt. He looked at the small cut on her forearm, a souvenir from the shattered vase. He reached out, his fingers ghosting over the injury. "I promised you safety," he said, his voice thick with self-loathing. 2 weeks, $5 million. And safety. I failed. You didn't fail. I'm here. I'm alive. You had to fight off 2 hitmen with hairspray because I was too arrogant to see Sabatini's move. I thought he would attack my business, not my... He trailed off. "Your what, Dominic?" Audrey stepped closer, challenged him. The air between them crackled, thicker than the tension in the tea shop had ever been. He looked into her eyes, and the mask of the Don slipped completely. She saw a man who was desperately lonely and terrified of losing the one thing he hadn't expected to find. "My wife," he finished hoarsely. Before she could process the shift in the atmosphere, his phone rang again. He answered, listened for a second, and a cruel, satisfied smile twisted his lips. "It's done," he said to Audrey, putting the phone down. "The docks are burning. You can see it from the north window." Audrey walked to the massive window overlooking the city. Far in the distance, near the black expanse of Lake Michigan, an orange glow stained the night sky. Smoke billowed upwards, blotting out the stars. She had wanted an adventure. She had wanted to escape the predictability of the Dewey Decimal System. Standing there, watching a $20 million bonfire lit in her honor by the most dangerous man in the city, she realized she had gotten exactly what she asked for. And God help her, she didn't want to leave. It was 3 in the morning. The adrenaline had long since faded, replaced by a bone-deep weariness, but Audrey couldn't sleep. She sat on the white leather couch, wrapped in the cashmere blanket, watching the embers of the distant fire still glowing against the skyline. She had changed out of the gown into one of Dominic's oversized shirts. It smelled like him, sandalwood and something metallic, like gun oil. The elevator pinged softly. Dominic emerged. He had changed out of his tuxedo into dark jeans and a black t-shirt. He looked younger, less like a king and more like a soldier back from the front lines. He stood in the entryway, watching her watch the fire. "I thought you'd be asleep," he said softly. "Hard to sleep when you know there's a price on your head." He winced. He walked over and sat on the opposite end of the couch, putting as much distance between them as possible. He looked exhausted. The events of the night weighed heavily on his shoulders. "I spoke to my contacts in the police department," he said. "The 2 men in the bathroom. They won't be talking. The one you blinded is permanently out of commission. Sabatini is furious about the docks. He's hemorrhaging money." "So it worked? The scorched earth strategy?" "It bought us time. He has to regroup. He can't strike again immediately without looking reckless to the other families." Dominic rubbed his face with both hands. "But it won't stop him. Not forever." "Why does he hate you so much, Dominic?" Audrey asked. "You said you didn't kill his brother. Is it just business? Territory?" Dominic leaned his head back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. "No, it's never just business with men like Sabatini. It's personal. It's about my father." Audrey turned to him, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Tell me." He hesitated. These were secrets people died for knowing. But then he looked at her, wearing his shirt, marked by his war, and realized the time for secrets was past. "My father, Lorenzo Cavallo, was a great man. But he had a flaw. He loved too deeply. When my mother died 10 years ago, he broke." Dominic's voice was devoid of emotion, reciting facts he had long since accepted. "He started making mistakes. He let sentimentality rule his decisions. He let rivals encroach on our territory because he didn't have the stomach for the necessary violence anymore." He turned his head to look at her. Sabatini was a lieutenant back then. He saw my father's weakness. He exploited it. He started chipping away at our empire, piece by piece, while my father mourned. By the time I took over, we were on the brink of collapse. I had to be ruthless to rebuild what my father lost. I had to be colder, harder, faster than anyone else, just to survive. A realization dawned on Audrey, cold and sharp. The scar on your eyebrow. Dominic touched it unconsciously, a reminder from Sabatini, from the early days of my takeover, a reminder that hesitation gets you cut. He stood up and walked to the window, blocking her view of the distant fire with his broad back. Sabatini doesn't just want my territory, Audrey. He wants to prove that I am my father's son. He wants to prove that I am weak, that I have a breaking point. He turned around, his silhouette dark against the city lights. He targeted you tonight because he thinks you are that breaking point. He thinks if he hurts you, I will crumble like Lorenzo did. Audrey's heart ached for the lonely boy who had to become a monster to save his family's legacy. But you didn't crumble, Dominic. You fought back. You burned his docks. Yes, he murmured, stepping closer, drawn to her against his will. But he was right about one thing. He stopped right in front of her, leaning down, his hands resting on the back of the couch, caging her in once again. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a confession. "I am weak," he whispered, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. "Because when I saw you barefooted in that hallway, holding your shoes, terrified, the thought of losing you brought me to my knees. I would have burned the entire world down, Audrey. Not for strategy. Not for the family name. Just for you." The admission hung heavy in the air between them. The fake marriage, the contract, the $5 million. It all seemed irrelevant now. "Dominic," she breathed, reaching out to touch his arm. His muscles were tense, vibrating with restrained energy. "You should leave," he said, pulling back sharply, as if her touch burned him. "The deal is off. I'll get you out of the city tonight. Sabatini is focused on me now. I can distract him while Silas gets you and Maya to Europe. You'll be safe there." "No." The word hung in the air. Dominic froze. "Excuse me." Audrey stood up. The blanket fell away. She stood before him in his shirt, looking him squarely in the eye. "I said no, I'm not leaving. We made a deal. 2 weeks. The situation has changed. It's too dangerous. I know the danger now, Dominic, and I'm choosing to stay." She took a step closer to him, invading his space for the first time. "You think caring about someone makes you weak like your father. You're wrong. It makes you stronger. It gives you something worth fighting for besides money and power." She reached up and placed a hand gently on his cheek, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes for a second. "Don't send me away, Nico," she whispered, using the name she had improvised in the tea shop, the name only she used. Dominic opened his eyes. The golden flecks in his irises were swirling. The restraint he had maintained since the moment they met finally snapped. With a low groan, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her flush against him. His other hand tangled in her hair, angling her face up to his. "If you stay," he growled, his voice rough with need, "there is no going back. No more separate rooms. No more pretending. You understand?" "I understand," Audrey whispered, her heart hammering against his chest. He didn't give her a chance to reconsider. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, cinematic kiss. It was desperate, possessive, and searing hot. It was a kiss that tasted of scotch, smoke, and a terrifying promise of forever. The morning after the docks burned, the city of Chicago was deceptively quiet. In the penthouse suite of the St. Regis, the mood was anything but peaceful. The air was thick with the heavy, unspoken weight of the night before, the kiss that had blurred the lines between the job and the reality. Audrey sat at the kitchen island, clutching a mug of black coffee. She watched Dominic pace the length of the living room while Silas cleaned his weapons on the dining table. "He's called a sit-down," Dominic said, his voice tight. "Noon today, at the Moody Church on Franklin Street. Neutral ground." "Sabatini?" Audrey asked. "Yes, and the heads of the other 3 families. The commission." Dominic stopped pacing and looked at her. "He's going to make his move. He's going to try to prove to the families that our marriage is a sham. If he succeeds, I lose the commission's protection. And then he kills me." "How can he prove it?" Audrey asked. "We've been careful." "He found the barista," Silas grunted, sliding the barrel of a Glock back into place. "The kid from the tea shop. Sabatini's men picked him up this morning. He's going to testify that I coerced you." Audrey's stomach dropped. "So it's over?" "Not yet." Dominic walked over to her. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes dark, but his gaze was fierce. "I'm going alone. I'll deny everything. I'll say the kid is lying, paid off by Sabatini. It's my word against a barista's." "It won't work," Audrey said, standing up. "Sabatini is slippery. If you go alone, you look guilty. You look like you're hiding your wife because she's afraid of you." "Audrey, no. I am not taking you into a room with the 5 most dangerous men in the Midwest. You don't have a choice, Nico," she said, using the nickname again. It was a weapon now. "If I walk in there holding your hand, looking at you like I worship the ground you walk on, the barista's testimony falls apart. Who are they going to believe? A terrified kid or the woman standing by her husband's side in the lion's den?" Dominic stared at her for a long moment. He reached out, his thumb brushing her lower lip, remembering the kiss. "If this goes wrong," he whispered, "there is no extraction team. There is no running." "Then we better make sure it goes right," Audrey said. "Zip me up." The church was old, smelling of incense and damp stone. The pews had been cleared from the center to make room for a large, round oak table. 5 men sat around it. In the shadows of the nave, dozens of armed men stood silent watch. When the heavy wooden doors creaked open, every head turned. Dominic walked in, looking every inch the king of the underworld. He wore a black suit, sharp enough to cut, and on his arm, dressed in a modest but elegant cream suit, was Audrey. She walked with her chin up, her grip on Dominic's arm relaxed, possessive. Luca Sabatini sat at the far end of the table. When he saw Audrey, his left eye twitched. "You brought her," Sabatini sneered. "Bold." "I have nothing to hide," Dominic said, pulling out a chair for Audrey before sitting down himself. "You called this meeting, Luca. Speak." Sabatini stood up. He addressed the other 3 dons, older men with stone faces. "Dominic Cavallo is a fraud," Sabatini announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "He claims to have taken a wife to secure his legacy, but it is a lie. He kidnapped this woman from a tea shop 3 days ago to use as a shield." Murmurs rippled through the room. "Bring him in," Sabatini barked. 2 thugs dragged a young man into the light. It was the barista from the Gilded Leaf. He looked terrified, his face bruised. "Tell them," Sabatini commanded. He came in," the barista stammered, looking at his shoes. "He sat at her booth. She looked scared. He made her pour tea. She wanted to call the police." Sabatini smiled. "A shark smelling blood. You hear that? A performance. Cavallo is weak. He relies on hostages, not family." The head of the commission, an ancient man named Don Morelli, looked at Dominic. "Is this true, Dominic?" Dominic opened his mouth, but Audrey squeezed his hand under the table. She silenced him. She stood up. The room went dead silent. Wives did not speak at commission meetings. It was unheard of. "This poor boy," Audrey said, her voice filled with sympathy. She looked at the barista. He must have been so confused. "It's true, we were arguing that day." Sabatini scoffed. "Arguing?" "Yes." Audrey turned her gaze to Sabatini. It was cold, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "I was trying to leave him. We had a fight. I told him I was done with the life, done with the danger. I went to the tea shop to hide." She looked down at Dominic, her eyes softening with a performance that deserved an Oscar. "He found me. He sat down and told me he wouldn't let me go. He told me he loved me too much to let me walk away. And yes, I was scared. I was scared of how much I still loved him." She turned back to the commission. "You call it kidnapping. We call it marriage. If shouting in a tea shop is a crime, then arrest every husband in this room." The barista looked confused. The story fit. It explained the fear, the tension, without admitting to the lie. "This is nonsense!" Sabatini slammed his hand on the table. "She is a paid actress, a librarian he picked off the street." "Prove it," Dominic said, finally speaking. His voice was low, dangerous. "You insulted my wife. You dragged her into this. You beat a civilian to try and frame me. You are desperate, Luca." Don Morelli looked from Sabatini to Audrey. He saw the way Audrey's hand rested on Dominic's shoulder. He saw the defiance in her eyes. "The girl speaks with fire," Morelli grunted. "She sounds like a cavallo." "She is a fraud," Sabatini screamed, losing his composure. He reached into his jacket. "Luca, no!" Morelli shouted. But Sabatini was too far gone. He pulled a gun, aiming it directly at Dominic's chest across the table. "I'll kill you both." Time seemed to slow down. Dominic moved with a speed that defied logic. He didn't reach for his own gun. He lunged in front of Audrey, shielding her body with his own. Bang! The sound was deafening in the stone church. Audrey screamed, feeling the impact shudder through Dominic's body as he slammed into her, knocking them both to the floor. "Dominic!" Gunfire erupted everywhere. Silas and the Cavallo guards returned fire instantly. The Commission's guards neutralized Sabatini's men. It was chaos. Audrey scrambled out from under Dominic. He was groaning, clutching his left shoulder. Blood was seeping through his fingers, staining the pristine white shirt red. "You idiot!" she cried, pressing her hands over his wound. "You took a bullet! I promised!" Dominic grit his teeth, his face pale. "I promised." Safety. Across the room, silence fell as quickly as the violence had started. Luca Sabatini lay on the stone floor, staring sightlessly at the ceiling, 3 rounds in his chest from Silas's gun. Don Morelli stood over the body, then looked at Dominic and Audrey. He saw the blood. He saw the wife frantically trying to save her husband, tears streaming down her face, ignoring the guns, ignoring the danger. "Get him a medic," Morelli ordered his men. "The feud is over. Cavallo keeps his territory." 3 days later. The private hospital room was quiet. Rain tapped against the window, just like it had on the day they met. Dominic sat up in bed, his shoulder bandaged. He was watching Audrey pack a bag. "The doctor said you'll make a full recovery," Audrey said, not looking at him. She folded a shirt with precise librarian movements. "Silas is outside. He has the car ready to take me to the airport. Maya is waiting in Paris. The $5 million is in the account you set up." "You're leaving," Dominic stated. It wasn't a question. "The contract is up," Audrey said. She zipped the bag. 2 weeks. Sabatini is dead. The Commission trusts you. You have your kingdom." She finally turned to look at him. She looked tired, but beautiful. "You held up your end of the deal, Dominic. You saved my life. And you saved mine," he said, "in the church. That lie, it was brilliant." "It wasn't all a lie," she said softly. Dominic swung his legs out of bed. He winced, but stood up. He walked over to her, ignoring her protests that he should rest. "Don't go," he said. "Dominic, we're from different worlds. I organize books. You burn down docks. It won't work." "I don't care about worlds," he said, taking her hand. "When Sabatini pointed that gun, my only thought was that if I died, I wanted to die protecting you." "That isn't a contract, Audrey. That's real." He reached into the drawer of the bedside table and pulled out a velvet box. "I intended to give this to you to make the disguise complete," he said. "But I never put it on your finger." He opened the box. Inside was a vintage diamond ring, dark and beautiful, fitting for a mob boss's wife. "I can't offer you a safe life," Dominic said, looking into her eyes. "I can't promise there won't be bad days. But I can promise that you will never have tea alone again. I can promise that I will burn the world down before I let anyone touch you." Audrey looked at the ring. She looked at the bag by the door, her ticket to a normal, safe, boring life. Then she looked at the man who had kidnapped her, terrified her, and then taken a bullet for her. She thought about the adrenaline, the fire, the feeling of his hand in hers. She realized that the quiet librarian who entered the tea shop 2 weeks ago didn't exist anymore. That woman had died the moment Dominic sat down. Audrey smiled, and it was a dangerous, dazzling smile. "I prefer coffee," she whispered, "and I expect you to remember our anniversary." Dominic let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Deal," he said. He leaned down and kissed her, and this time there was no audience, no performance, and no end date. And that is how Audrey Bennett went from organizing history books to making history as the queen of the Chicago underworld. It's funny how life works. Sometimes the worst day of your life, the day you think everything is falling apart, is actually the day everything falls into place. Dominic thought he needed a fake wife to save his empire, but he ended up finding the only person real enough to save his soul. They say love is a battlefield, but for Audrey and Dominic, the battlefield was where they found love. What about you? If a handsome, dangerous stranger sat down at your table and asked you to pretend to be his wife to save both your lives, would you play along? Or would you have screamed for the police? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this twisty mafia romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this story with a friend who loves a bad boy with a heart of gold, and hit subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss the next drama. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.